You got a problem following orders, or is this just something you people do? Officer Derek Lawson hissed as the metal clicked shut over Ryan Mitchell's wrists. Lawson yanked him back from the burning sedan like he was removing a piece of trash from a crime scene, not a man who had just pulled a mother and her baby out of a car that was still on fire. Ryan didn't fight it. He stood straight, shoulders back, jaw set, while phones recorded from the overpass above and the crowd fell completely silent. What Officer Derek Lawson couldn't possibly have known was that the incident wouldn't end Ryan Mitchell's career. It would end his. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because the next story is one you can't miss. The smoke was the first thing. Black and thick, it rolled up from the freeway overpass like something alive, twisting against the bright sky. Ryan Mitchell saw it before the truck even turned the corner. His stomach tightened the way it always did. Not from fear, but from focus. His body was already shifting into gear before Captain Rebecca Hayes finished the radio call. A multi-car pileup with possible entrapments and one vehicle on fire. He knew exactly what that smoke meant. The engine screeched to a stop. Ryan was off the truck before the wheels fully settled, boots hitting the asphalt hard, gear clanking around him. The heat hit him in the face like an open oven door. The smell hit him next. Gasoline, burnt rubber, and something sharper underneath. Something urgent. He scanned the scene fast. A minivan had rolled onto its side near the center divider. Its windshield was spiderwebbed and caved in. A pair of hands were visible through the shattered passenger window, pressing weakly against the glass. Someone alive in there, conscious enough to reach out. To his left, a white sedan was burning. Not just smoking, burning. Orange flames licked up through the hood and crawled toward the door panels, and there, barely visible through the smoke-blackened window, was a woman. Her head was slumped forward. In the back seat, a young child sat strapped into a car seat, her small face turned toward the window, mouth open in a silent scream that the roaring fire swallowed whole. Ryan felt everything narrow down to those points. The minivan driver was conscious and stable for now. The sedan held the woman and the child who were in immediate danger from the fire. He made his call. "Matt!" Ryan shouted over his shoulder. His partner, Matt Carter, was already pulling equipment off the truck. "Minivan! Woman trapped, conscious! Go!" Matt nodded once and moved. Ryan ran toward the burning sedan. He was aware of people on the overpass railing above, drivers who had stopped, passengers out of their cars, phones already up and recording. He was aware of the heat getting worse with every step. He was aware of the gasoline pooling under the car, black and shimmering. He was not aware of the LAPD cruiser parked nearby or the officer leaning against the hood of it, arms folded, watching. Not yet. Ryan reached the sedan's door and yanked the handle. Locked. The frame was warped from the impact. He grabbed his Halligan bar, drove the fork into the door seam, and leaned his full weight into it. Metal screamed. The door buckled. One more pull, and it tore open. The smoke that poured out made his eyes sting even through his mask. The woman inside, a streak of blood running from her hairline down her cheek, stirred at the rush of air. Her seatbelt had locked tight across her chest, pinning her at an angle. The flames were moving faster now. Ryan could hear the fuel line hissing somewhere underneath the chassis. "Ma'am?" His voice was calm, firm. "I've got you. Don't move." He cut the seatbelt with one hand and supported her weight with the other. She was limp but breathing. He pulled her free from the seat in one smooth motion, turned his body to shield her from the heat, and carried her away from the car. Far enough. He set her down on the asphalt, away from the gasoline, away from the fire. Then he went back for the car seat. The toddler inside was crying, loud, furious, full-lunged crying. Ryan had never been so glad to hear anything in his life. Crying meant breathing. Crying meant alive. He unclipped the harness, lifted the child out, and walked back to where the mother was lying. The crowd above erupted. Applause and shouts rained down from the railing. Someone was screaming, "Thank you," over and over. Ryan barely heard it. He was already kneeling beside the woman, checking her pulse, checking her airway, checking the child. The little girl had stopped crying. She was staring up at Ryan with enormous dark eyes, one fist wrapped around a strap of his gear. "She's okay," he thought. "They're both okay." He exhaled slowly, just for a second, just one, just... That's when he heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming from the direction of the police cruiser. Ryan looked up. The officer walking toward him was broad-shouldered, mid-30s, with the kind of walk that said he owned whatever ground he was standing on. His jaw was tight, his eyes were flat. He wasn't looking at the burning car or the injured woman or the child. He was looking at Ryan, and there was something in his expression that Ryan recognized immediately. Something he had seen before, in other places, on other days. It was the look of a man who had already decided he had a problem. The officer's name tag read, Lawson. He stopped a short distance away. He didn't look at Lisa Bennett lying on the asphalt. He didn't look at the little girl blinking in Ryan's arms. He didn't look at the sedan still smoldering yards behind them, its fuel line hissing like a slow countdown. He looked at Ryan. "You need to clear this area," Lawson said. "Right now. These vehicles are my scene." Ryan kept his eyes on Lisa's breathing. Her chest was rising and falling steadily. "Good." He passed the toddler carefully to a bystander who had rushed forward from the railing, a heavy-set man in a construction vest who took the child with steady hands. Then Ryan stood up slowly and turned to face Lawson. "Officer?" Ryan kept his voice even, professional. "The fuel line on that sedan hasn't been secured yet. Fire isn't fully suppressed. Nobody goes near that car until my crew clears it. That's protocol." Lawson's eyes narrowed. "I didn't ask for a lesson. I said clear the area." "I understand that, and I will, once the scene is safe." Ryan held his ground, not aggressively, just firmly, the way you stand when you know you're right. Lawson's face tightened, a flatness behind the eyes that had nothing to do with the situation and everything to do with the man. "You don't give me anything," Lawson said. "You move when I tell you to move." Ryan said nothing. He simply stood between Lawson and the burning car. That was his job. That was the only job that mattered right now. Lawson took a step to the right, moving to go around him. Ryan stepped with him, same direction, no contact, no aggression, just a body between a reckless man and a live hazard. Lawson stopped. His nostrils flared. "Are you serious right now?" His voice dropped low, dangerous. "You're really going to stand there and block a police officer?" "I'm standing in front of an unsecured fuel line," Ryan said. "You're welcome to wait back." The words were calm. They were the exact wrong thing to say to a man like Derek Lawson. "Oh, I see." Lawson tilted his head. A cold little smile crossed his face. "Big hero. Whole crowd watching, huh?" He glanced up at the overpass railing, at the people pressed against it with their phones out. Then he looked back at Ryan, and the smile disappeared completely. "You think I won't drop you right here in front of all of them?" "I think you should step back," Ryan said quietly, "and let us finish our job." It happened fast, faster than anyone watching fully processed in the moment. Lawson moved, not toward the car, toward Ryan. He grabbed Ryan's arm at the wrist and yanked him sideways, spinning him hard. Ryan's first instinct was to pull away, but he killed it immediately. He knew exactly what resisting would look like on the phone cameras, so he didn't fight it. He let his body turn. The handcuffs came out, one click, then two. Cold metal bit into Ryan's wrists, locked tight over the bulk of his rescue gear. The crowd went silent, not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that falls when something happens that the brain needs an extra second to believe. Ryan stood beside Lawson's cruiser, hands cuffed behind his back, still in full firefighting gear. Turnout coat, air pack, helmet hanging at his side. Behind him, the sedan still smoldered. Somewhere to his left, Matt had frozen completely, a hydraulic tool hanging loose in his hand, staring at Ryan with an expression caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. Lawson straightened his shirt, reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Lawson. I've got a combative firefighter detained at the scene. Need a supervisor." Combative. The word landed like a slap. Ryan said nothing. He stood straight, shoulders back, eyes forward. He breathed slowly through his nose, the way his father had taught him a long time ago, in a different kind of situation, on a different kind of day. Don't give them the version of you they're looking for. Phones were pointed at him, maybe more. He was aware of all of them. He was aware of Lisa Bennett being loaded onto a stretcher by paramedics who had just arrived. He was aware of the toddler crying again from somewhere behind him. He was aware of the fuel line that still hadn't been cleared because his crew had stopped to stare. He was aware of all of it. And then he heard tires, a vehicle pulling hard onto the overpass, a door opened, boots on asphalt. He didn't need to turn around to know the footsteps. He had heard them many times on many different floors. Captain Rebecca Hayes had arrived. Hayes didn't run. That was the first thing Ryan noticed. She walked, Steady, deliberate, each step measured from her vehicle toward the cruiser where Ryan stood cuffed. Her eyes swept the scene in one practiced pass. The smoldering sedan. Matt frozen with the hydraulic tool, the phones pointing from the railing above, Lawson standing with his chest out and his radio in his hand. She took it all in without a word, then she stopped in front of Lawson. "Officer." Her voice was flat and careful. "What is the basis for this detainment?" "Your guy obstructed a law enforcement officer at an active scene," Lawson said. He sounded bored, like this was already settled. "Blocked my access, refused direct orders. I have it well within my authority to—" "Noted," Hayes said. Just that. One word. She turned away from him and pulled out her phone. Lawson blinked. "Excuse me, I'm not finished." Hayes was already dialing. She didn't call dispatch. She didn't call the union line or the department's non-emergency number or any of the official channels that would have put her on hold and routed her through different offices. She called Fire Chief Harold Grant's personal cell phone, the number she had been given years ago and had never once used for anything small. She used it now. It rang twice. "Chief," she said. "It's Hayes, Station 7. I need you at the freeway overpass near Glendale Avenue right now." A pause. She listened. "Because one of my firefighters is standing in his rescue gear with his hands cuffed behind his back, and there are cameras on him." "Yes, sir. That is exactly what I said." She hung up. Lawson stared at her. "You think calling your boss is going to change anything? Lady, I don't answer to the fire department." Hayes looked at him for a long moment. The look of a woman who had survived decades in a profession that hadn't wanted her, who had outlasted every man who had ever underestimated her, and who had absolutely nothing left to prove to anyone. She said nothing. She walked over and stood next to Ryan. They waited. It didn't take long. Two black SUVs came off the freeway ramp hard and rolled onto the overpass with the kind of authority that parted the rubbernecking traffic like water. They stopped a short distance from Lawson's cruiser. The doors opened. Fire Chief Harold Grant stepped out first. He was built like a former offensive lineman gone distinguished, with silver at his temples and the quiet bearing of a man who had spent 4 decades walking into burning buildings and walking back out again. He was still in his dress uniform from the press conference. Behind him, Councilwoman Jennifer Lee stepped out, phone already in her hand. Behind her, a local news crew spilled out of a third vehicle. They had been covering the press conference, had followed the SUVs on instinct, and now a camera was up and rolling before anyone told them to stop. Grant walked directly toward Lawson, not fast, not slow, the walk of a man who has never once needed to hurry to make a point. Lawson saw him coming, saw the camera, saw Councilwoman Lee already on her phone. The easy confidence on his face flickered once, like a light with a loose connection, and then went carefully blank. Grant stopped 2 feet in front of him. "Son." His voice was low, unhurried. It carried the way a voice does when it has never needed to be raised. "You're going to take those cuffs off my firefighter, right now." Lawson's jaw tightened. For a moment that felt much longer, he didn't move. His hand stayed at his side. His eyes cut sideways to the news camera, then back to Grant, then to the crowd pressed against the railing above. Ryan could see it happening behind Lawson's eyes, the calculation, the desperate scrambling arithmetic of a man trying to find a version of this situation where he still came out on top. He didn't find one. His chin lifted slightly. One last reflex of defiance, and then something in his posture shifted, not a collapse, more like a slow leak. His shoulders dropped a fraction, his hand moved to his belt slow and reluctant, like every inch of the movement cost him something. He pulled out his keys. He stepped around Grant without a word. His face locked into an expression that was working very hard to look like indifference and not quite getting there. He reached Ryan, inserted the key, and released the cuffs with a click that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. The crowd on the railing above erupted. Cheering, shouting, a wave of noise that rolled down from the overpass like something breaking loose. Someone was screaming, "That's right." Someone else was clapping so hard it echoed. Ryan brought his hands forward slowly. He rolled his wrists once, looked down at them for exactly 1 second. Then he looked up. "Thank you, Chief," he said. He turned away from Lawson, away from the cameras, away from all of it. He walked back toward the sedan where the fuel line still needed clearing and the job still needed finishing. Because that was why he was here. Behind him, Derek Lawson stood alone on the hot asphalt. The crowd still buzzing above him, the news camera still rolling, and absolutely no one was looking at him anymore. Karen Ellis's kitchen table had seen a lot of fights. Not the kind with raised voices and thrown dishes, the quiet kind. The kind fought with documents and deadlines, and the precise, patient dismantling of powerful people who believed they were untouchable. Her late husband used to say the table had won more cases than any courtroom she'd ever stood in. Ryan had eaten dinner at that table as a boy, watching his father and Karen spread papers across it like a battlefield map. It felt exactly the same tonight. Ryan sat across from her and told her everything, start to finish. He didn't editorialize. He didn't skip anything. He laid it out the way his father had taught him. Facts first, feelings sequenced, always clear. Karen sat across from him with a legal pad and a pen and didn't interrupt once. When he finished, she set down the pen. "Tell me you have the footage," she said. "Witnesses sent it to me directly. Matt has his own account written up already. Captain Hayes has a formal statement ready to attach." Ryan slid his phone across the table, and Susan Miller called me. She was discharged from the hospital. Karen raised an eyebrow. "The minivan victim?" She wanted my number from the department's public line. Took her time to track it down. Ryan paused. She was not happy. Karen almost smiled. She picked up his phone and watched the clearest of the clips without a word. When it finished, she watched it again. Then she set the phone down and folded her hands on top of her legal pad. "This is strong, Ryan," she said. "The footage is clear. The witness list is solid. Hayes' statement alone would be enough to open an investigation." She paused. "File it in person. Don't mail it. Don't email it. Walk it through the door and get a time-stamped receipt." Ryan nodded. "And then," she said, "we wait." They filed the complaint. Ryan, Hayes, and Matt walked into the LAPD Internal Affairs Office on San Fernando Road with printed statements, a USB drive containing the video clips, and Karen's cover letter attached to the top of the stack. The officer at the intake desk accepted the packet, stamped the receipt, and told them the standard processing timeline. Time passed with no update. More time passed with no update. Hayes called the IA office and was told the investigation was ongoing and that they could not discuss active case details. She called again and was told the same thing by a different person using the exact same words, like they were reading from a card. Ryan told himself to be patient. He had seen slow before. Slow didn't mean stopped. Then the phone call came. Ryan was at his kitchen table paying bills when his cell rang. An LAPD extension. He answered and put it on speaker, grabbing a notepad out of habit. The IA officer on the other end introduced himself as Sergeant Harris. His voice was pleasant and unhurried. He said he was calling to gather some additional information about the incident. Ryan said, of course, he was ready. The first question was about his tone during the confrontation with Officer Lawson. Had he been agitated? The second was whether he had made any physical contact before Lawson applied the restraints. The third was whether he had a history of disagreements with law enforcement at multi-agency scenes. Ryan answered every question the same way, calmly, factually, briefly. When the call ended, he sat very still for a moment. Then he called Karen. She picked up on the second ring. He read her back every question from his notepad, word for word. There was a silence on the other end that lasted just long enough to mean something. "He didn't ask you a single question about Lawson," she said. "Not one." Another silence. "Come over," she said. They sat at the kitchen table again, the legal pad between them. Karen walked through it slowly, thinking out loud. The questions weren't investigative. They were preparatory. Someone was building a file, not on Lawson, on Ryan. "He has protection somewhere inside that department," Ryan said. Karen nodded slowly, tapping her pen against the pad. "Then we need to find out exactly where it is." She looked up at him. "Go home. Get some sleep. I'll start digging." Ryan drove home through the quiet Glendale streets. He watched her porch light through his rearview mirror as he pulled away. Karen didn't go to bed. She went back to the kitchen table, opened her laptop, and typed 2 words into the search bar: Derek Lawson. A couple of mornings after the call from Sergeant Harris, Ryan was standing at the stove making eggs when he heard the front door. Maddie came in from the mailbox the way she always did, backpack half on, earbuds around her neck, already talking before she was fully through the door. She was the youngest and had never once entered a room quietly in her life. Ryan loved that about her. "Dad, there's a certified letter. I had to sign for it." She dropped it on the counter beside him without looking at it and opened the refrigerator. "We're out of orange juice again." I know, there's apple juice in the back. Apple juice is not orange juice. That is factually correct, Ryan said. Brooke appeared at the bottom of the stairs, already in her school clothes, her mother's eyes in her father's face. She poured herself coffee. She'd started drinking it black, a development Ryan had not fully accepted, and sat at the counter without a word. Morning? Brooke didn't speak much. That was fine. Ryan understood morning quiet. He flipped the eggs. Then he looked at the letter. It was a standard white envelope, but the return address stopped him. Not LAPD. Not Internal Affairs. City of Glendale. Office of Risk Management. He turned off the burner. He picked up the envelope and opened it at the counter, his back half turned to his daughters. He read it once, quickly. Then he read it again, slowly. Because the first time through he was sure he had misread something. He hadn't. The letter cited Ryan David Mitchell, firefighter, Station 7, Glendale Fire Department for 2 violations. Interference with law enforcement operations and creating an unsafe condition at an active emergency scene. It recommended a suspension without pay. Effective pending the outcome of a formal disciplinary hearing before the fire department's oversight board. A hearing date would be scheduled. Ryan set the letter face down on the counter. Eggs are ready, he said. His voice came out completely normal. He was proud of that. He waited until the girls left for school. He stood at the kitchen window and watched Brooke's car back out of the driveway, Maddie in the passenger seat already on her phone. And he waited until they turned the corner and disappeared. Then he picked up the letter and called Karen. She answered on the first ring. He read it to her word for word. He didn't editorialize. When he finished, the line was quiet for a moment. They flipped it, she said. That's what it looks like. Ryan, listen to me carefully. Her voice shifted into the register he recognized from his childhood. The one that meant she was 3 steps ahead and needed him to catch up fast. This letter did not come from nowhere. Risk management doesn't move on active first responders without a push from somewhere. Someone with reach inside that department picked up the phone and made this happen. A pause. This is retaliation. Pure and clean. And they were counting on you not recognizing it fast enough to stop it. They miscounted, Ryan said. They did. But I need you to do something very hard right now. She waited a beat. Nothing. You say nothing. Not to your crew, not to your neighbors, not to anyone who might say something to someone who says something to a reporter. You come to my office and we build this correctly. What about the hearing? We'll file for a delay on procedural grounds. That buys us time. He could hear her already moving, papers shifting. Can you do that? Can you sit on this? Ryan looked at the letter on the counter. At his father's framed law degree on the wall above the fireplace, visible through the kitchen doorway. Robert Mitchell, attorney at law, decades fighting exactly this kind of machine, with exactly this kind of patience. Yes, Ryan said, I can do that. That evening, Ryan sat at the kitchen table while his daughters did homework. The letter lay in front of him, face up now. He didn't hide it. He just didn't explain it. Maddie was working through a history assignment with her headphones on. Brooke was reading, feet tucked under her on the couch, unbothered. They didn't know what the letter meant, and he was glad for that. He wanted them to have one more ordinary evening before the ordinary ran out. He looked at his father's law degree for a long time. Robert Mitchell had never once let a system like this one have the last word. Not ever. Ryan picked up the letter, folded it once, and put it in his shirt pocket. Not quietly. He said softly to no one in the room, to his father maybe, or maybe just to himself. Karen's office light had been on since early. Ryan could see it from the parking lot when he pulled in, a warm yellow rectangle in the gray pre-dawn, visible through the gap in the blinds. He had barely slept. He doubted she had slept at all. He knocked twice and let himself in. The desk he remembered as always clear and ordered was buried. Printed records fanned out across the surface in overlapping rows. A departmental org chart had been taped to the wall beside her bookshelf, with names circled in red pen and lines drawn between them in a way that reminded Ryan of something you'd see in a detective movie. Except this wasn't a movie. Every circled name was real. Karen stood at the wall with a coffee mug studying it. Sit down, she said without turning around. Ryan sat. She turned and looked at him the way she used to look at his father when she was about to deliver news that needed to be received carefully, not gently, just carefully. There was a difference. Derek Lawson, she said. What do you know about his family? Ryan shook his head. Nothing. Karen nodded like that was the expected answer. She moved to her desk and picked up a single printed sheet, a departmental directory, names and titles in small black type. She slid it across the desk and pointed to one line near the top of the page. Lawson, Robert L., Deputy Chief, West Bureau, Internal Affairs Oversight. Ryan looked at the name. Then he looked up at Karen. He runs IA Oversight, she said, for the exact division that received your complaint. Every supervisor in that chain reports to him. The officer who called you, Sergeant Harris, with his charming little questions about your tone, his direct supervisor answers to Robert Lawson. She paused. Derek is his nephew. The room was very quiet. Ryan set the paper down. He breathed through it. He let the shape of it settle. The complaint he had filed, delivered with full documentation and video clips, and the signed statement of a fire captain, handed directly into the administrative machinery of the man whose job it was to protect the officer he was complaining about. They were never going to investigate, Ryan said. They were never going to investigate, Karen confirmed. And it gets worse. She picked up 2 folders from the left side of her desk and opened them side by side. Inside each one was a complaint form. Different dates, different names, same subject. 2 prior complaints against Derek Lawson. Both filed by first responders at multi-agency scenes. 1 paramedic, 1 county EMT, both logged by IA, both closed with a finding of insufficient evidence. She tapped the first folder. This one, the paramedic's complaint, came with a written witness statement from a second EMT who was standing nearby when Lawson got physical. That statement is in the file. She tapped the second folder. It was never entered into the formal record. Someone pulled it out before the closure was signed. Ryan looked at the folders. Who signed the closures? Karen turned and pointed to the org chart on the wall, to one of the circled names, a supervisor 2 levels below Robert Lawson, connected by a red line. Someone who wanted to keep his job, she said. Ryan leaned back in his chair. He was quiet for a moment, not because he was lost, but because he was thinking clearly and needed the space to do it without interrupting himself. So we have a pattern, he said. Complaints go in. The right people make sure they go nowhere. And anyone who pushes back gets a letter from risk management recommending a suspension, Karen said. Yes. She sat down across from him. She picked up her pen and pulled her legal pad forward. I'm filing a motion today to delay your disciplinary hearing on procedural grounds. The motion is solid. They moved too fast and skipped required notification steps. That buys us time. She wrote something at the top of the page. I'm also filing a public records request for the complete IA file on both prior complaints. They'll stall. They always stall. But stalling creates a paper trail, and paper trails become evidence. Ryan nodded slowly. What do we do with the time? Karen looked at him over the top of her reading glasses. We build something they can't dismantle, she said. This is bigger than one bad cop, Ryan. But bigger means more evidence, and more evidence means they lose. She uncapped her pen. Now, let's get to work. The following morning, Captain Rebecca Hayes was waiting at the station before the day shift arrived. That wasn't unusual. She was always early. What was unusual was the way she was standing when Ryan and Matt walked in. Not at her desk, not in the bay checking equipment, but in the middle of the common room with her arms folded and her jaw set, waiting for everyone to be present before she said a single word. When the last man came through the door, she started talking. She told them everything. The letter from risk management, the suspension recommendation, the complaint that had been filed into an IA division run by Derek Lawson's uncle and had quietly disappeared. She told it the way she told everything, straight, clean, no softening of the edges. Station 7 was not a crew that needed to be protected from hard news. They were a crew that needed to be trusted with it. When she finished, the room was still. Then one of the younger guys, a firefighter named Ramirez, who had been on the job a short time, said, "So what do we do?" Hayes looked at him. "Everything we legally can," she said, "starting right now." Her first call was to the firefighters union. She had the regional director on the phone, and she did not ease into the conversation. She laid out the facts, cited the procedural violations in the risk management letter, and used the words coordinated retaliation without blinking. By the time the conversation ended, the union had assigned a labor attorney named Paul Jenkins to Ryan's case, a compact, fast-talking man in his 50s who had handled many disciplinary cases in his career. He called Ryan that afternoon. His opening line was, I've read the letter. It's sloppy. They were in a hurry, and hurry makes mistakes. Let's talk. Ryan liked him immediately. Hayes spent the rest of the day making quieter calls to battalion chiefs she knew in neighboring counties, to a state firefighters association contact she'd had for years, to a first responder advocacy group based in Sacramento. She wasn't asking for press statements or public declarations. She was building awareness, laying groundwork, making sure that when the moment came to apply pressure from multiple directions at once, the network was already warm. Matt had been busy on his own. He hadn't told Ryan what he was doing, partly because he wasn't sure it would amount to anything, and partly because Matt Carter had always been the kind of man who brought results to the table rather than intentions. He'd spent evenings after shift making phone calls through a network of mutual contacts. Other firefighters, former medics, guys he'd known from his Army days who had moved into emergency services across Southern California. What he found were two names: a firefighter in Pasadena named Tommy Rivera, who had a run-in with Lawson at a structure fire some time ago. Lawson had physically removed him from a perimeter Tommy had established for a gas leak, then filed nothing and said nothing when Tommy nearly took it to his captain. And a battalion lieutenant in Burbank named Gary Thompson, older guy with years on the job, who had an incident with Lawson at a freeway accident that he'd chosen to let go because he didn't want the headache. Neither man had filed a formal complaint. Both were willing to talk now. Matt drove to Pasadena one evening and sat with Tommy Rivera at his kitchen table. He drove to Burbank the next afternoon and met Gary Thompson in the parking lot of a diner near the station. He came back to Glendale with two handwritten statements, signed and dated, and dropped them on Karen's desk without fanfare. Karen looked at the statements. Then she looked at Matt. "How long did this take you?" she asked. "Not long," he said. "Good man," she said. Ryan's cell phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He answered it and heard a calm, professional voice introduce itself as belonging to a reporter from the Los Angeles Times. He called Karen before the reporter finished her second sentence. Karen's answer was immediate. "No comment, not yet. Tell her you'll be in touch through your attorney." Ryan related. The reporter was polite. She said she understood and that the story was running regardless based on footage already in the public domain. That evening, Ryan sat at his kitchen table and pulled up the Los Angeles Times website on his phone. The headline was already there, sitting at the top of the local news section. "Firefighter handcuffed mid-rescue. Witnesses ask why." He read it twice. Then he set his phone face down on the table and sat quietly in the kitchen for a long while, listening to the house settle around him. It had begun. Ryan read the LAPD statement before his coffee went cold. It had been posted to the department's official website, distributed to every major local outlet simultaneously, and written in the careful, bloodless language of an institution that had done this many times before. But underneath the careful language, if you knew how to read it, the message was anything but careful. Officer Lawson responded appropriately to a combative individual who aggressively blocked access to an active scene and refused direct orders from a law enforcement officer. Officer Lawson's actions were consistent with departmental policy and within the full scope of his authority. We stand fully behind Officer Lawson's judgment and professionalism. Combative. The word appeared throughout. Not aggressive, not resistant, combative. A word chosen deliberately, Ryan knew, the same way you choose a tool because it did a specific job. It painted a picture. It put something in the reader's mind that the video footage, watched without context, might just barely support if you were already looking for it. He closed the browser and called Karen. "I saw it," she said before he finished his first sentence. "Don't respond. Don't post anything. Don't text anyone who might post anything. They want a reaction. Don't give them one." Social media divided the way it always did, fast, loud, and along lines that had been drawn long before Ryan Mitchell's name appeared on anyone's screen. The people who believed him completely. The people who didn't never had any intention of it. The comments found Ryan anyway. Brooke showed him without meaning to. She had been reading them on her phone at the kitchen counter when he walked in, and the look on her face told him everything before he saw the screen. She tried to close the app. He gently took the phone from her hand. He read for a moment, then he gave it back. "Don't read those," he said. "They're calling you a liar, Dad." Her voice was tight and controlled in the way of someone who learned composure from watching a parent practice it their whole life, but hadn't quite finished learning yet. "They're saying you went after him. They're saying you've always had a problem with authority." "I know what they're saying." "How are you not?" She stopped, pressed her lips together. Angry? He said. She nodded. Ryan sat down at the counter across from her. I am angry, he said. I'm very angry, but anger without direction is just noise. And right now we can't afford noise. We need to be surgical. He held her eyes until she nodded once. Trust Karen. Trust the process we're building, okay? Maddie appeared in the kitchen doorway, already vibrating. She had clearly been listening from the hall. I want to post something, she announced. Absolutely not. Ryan and Brooke said at exactly the same moment. That evening, Ryan took both girls to dinner. A booth in the back of their usual diner, red vinyl seats, laminated menus they didn't need to read. He ordered the meatloaf. The girls ordered what they always ordered. It was deliberately, consciously normal. He told them the truth. Not everything, but enough. He said there were people who wanted this to go away quietly, and that making it go away quietly meant making Ryan go away quietly. And that was not going to happen. Maddie said, So what are we going to do? Brooke said, We're going to win. She said it the way his father used to say it, not boastfully, just as a statement of settled fact. Ryan looked at his older daughter for a moment and felt something move through his chest that he didn't have a clean word for. The following morning, Captain Rebecca Hayes arrived at work to find a voicemail from Assistant Chief Daniels asking her to come upstairs. She came upstairs. Daniels was a decent man caught in an indecent position, and he knew she knew it. He didn't look comfortable in his own chair. He told her, in language that was carefully constructed to sound like advice rather than a warning, that she should allow the established processes to work, and that her continued personal involvement in the matter was creating complications at levels above his pay grade. Hayes sat across from him and let him finish. Then she smiled at him. The particular smile of a woman who has been told to sit down and be quiet more times than she can count, and has never once done it. Understood, sir, she said. I absolutely will. She went back downstairs, closed her office door, opened her email, and forwarded everything she had, every note, every contact, every name Matt had surfaced, directly to Karen Ellis. Then she went out to the bay and got back to work. Karen called. Ryan was already awake. He'd been awake since early, sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee going cold beside him the way he had a habit of doing lately. He picked up on the first ring. I'm ready to move, she said. No greeting, no preamble, just the decisive, forward-leaning energy of a woman who had made up her mind and spent the hours making sure she was right. Not the hearing. Not IA. We're going above all of it. Ryan straightened in his chair. Tell me. I'm filing a civil rights complaint with the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing this morning. We're citing the arrest, the IA stonewalling, and the retaliatory disciplinary citation as a coordinated pattern of civil rights violations. She paused. And simultaneously, I'm filing a public records lawsuit in Superior Court to force immediate disclosure of the full IA file. Both filings, same morning. We hit them from two directions at once and we don't give them time to adjust. Ryan was quiet for a moment. Is the case strong enough? Ryan? Her voice was patient but firm. We have footage of the arrest. We have Hayes' statement. We have Matt's account. We have 2 sworn affidavits from firefighters in neighboring counties establishing a pattern of conduct. We have documented evidence of a suppressed witness statement inside an IA file managed by the subject officer's uncle. She let that sit. Yes, the case is strong enough. Then let's do it, he said. The filings landed. By the time the Los Angeles Times reporter who had covered the original story received notification through her legal contacts, she was on the phone with Karen's office requesting comment. Karen gave her a single prepared statement, 3 sentences, precise and devastating, and nothing else. The story was online. Ryan read it at the station on his break, sitting in the cab of the engine where it was quiet. The headline stretched across the top of his phone screen like something that had been building and had finally broken the surface. Civil rights complaint filed against LAPD over firefighter arrest. Attorney alleges coordinated retaliation. The article was thorough. The reporter had done her work. It named the DFEH filing. It named the public records lawsuit. It laid out the timeline, the arrest, the IA delay, the retaliatory citation with the clean, factual clarity that made the pattern impossible to dismiss as coincidence. It quoted Karen's statement in full. It did not yet name Robert Lawson, but it described in careful and accurate language the structural conflict of interest within the West Bureau's IA oversight process. Ryan read it twice. Then he climbed down from the cab and went back to work. National outlets picked up the story. And then Susan Miller gave her interview. Ryan saw it on the news at home, sitting on the couch with his daughters on either side of him. Susan was in her living room, tidy, bright, bookshelves visible behind her, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She was composed in the way that only people who have genuinely stopped caring about others' opinions of them can be composed. She looked directly at the camera and spoke without notes and without hesitation. She described what she saw from inside the overturned minivan. The fire, the rescue, Ryan pulling Lisa Bennett and her daughter free from a burning car, and then the handcuffs. "That man was saving my life," she said clearly, "and that officer put him in handcuffs for it. I was a school teacher for years. I know exactly what I saw." The anchor thanked her. Susan nodded once, as though the interview had simply been a task that needed completing. And it was now complete. Maddie, sitting beside Ryan, grabbed his arm with both hands and didn't let go. The city council chamber erupted the following morning in a way that made the evening news its own separate story. Councilwoman Jennifer Lee stood at the podium and called for an immediate independent review of both the incident and the IA process, with a directness that left no room for procedural deflection. The fire chief's office released a statement of full and unambiguous support for Ryan Mitchell. The police commission requested an emergency briefing. That evening, Ryan sat in Karen's office while she reviewed the day's developments with the methodical satisfaction of a woman watching a carefully built structure hold exactly the weight she designed it to carry. For one full day, it felt like the worst of it was over. Ryan drove home with the windows down and the evening air coming through the car. And for the first time since the afternoon on the overpass, he let himself exhale completely. He should have known better. After the filings, Ryan was at Karen's office. The national attention had changed the temperature of everything. Karen had spent the morning fielding calls from 2 civil rights organizations who wanted to file supporting briefs, and a law professor at UCLA who had written about coordinated IA retaliation and wanted to be useful. Paul Jenkins, the union attorney, had sent over an updated filing strategy. The momentum felt real, solid, like ground you could stand on. Ryan was at the conference table working through the hearing preparation documents when Karen's assistant, a young woman named Emily, opened the door without knocking. That alone told Ryan something was wrong. Emily never opened doors without knocking. She was holding a tablet with both hands. Her face had the particular expression of someone delivering news they wish someone else had been assigned to deliver. "It's on Twitter," she said. "It's moving fast." Karen took the tablet. Ryan stood up and looked over her shoulder. The clip was short. Ryan recognized it immediately, not because he remembered the recording, but because he remembered the moment. A fundraiser for the county's Emergency Services Association some time ago. A heated conversation with a county supervisor named Mark Thompson, who had been quietly lobbying to cut the fire department's rescue equipment budget. Ryan had been direct. He had been passionate. He had leaned forward across a cocktail table and used his hands when he talked and had not smiled once during the entire exchange because there was nothing to smile about. The circulated clip, stripped of everything before and everything after, stripped of Supervisor Thompson's smug dismissal that had preceded it, stripped of the budget documents Ryan had been holding, made Ryan Mitchell look like a man who got in powerful people's faces and didn't stop when asked. The caption beneath the clip read, "Firefighter hailed as hero, has history of confrontational behavior." Karen set the tablet down on the table very carefully, like it was something that might break or something that might bite. "Who posted it?" Ryan asked. "A political commentator with a large following." Emily's voice was steady. "It's already been reposted many times. It had been picked up by media outlets. The LAPD's public information officer had released a new statement, brief, measured, and precisely timed. In light of newly surfaced footage documenting a prior incident involving firefighter Mitchell, the department notes that Officer Lawson may have had reasonable cause to perceive a threat based on the subject's documented pattern of behavior. The department maintains its full support of Officer Lawson's conduct. Documented pattern, 2 words doing enormous damage. Ryan sat in Karen's office and read the statement on his phone and said nothing. Karen was on her laptop. "The clip came from a dashcam archive," she said. That means someone with access to official footage pulled it, trimmed it, and fed it to a political commentator. That is not a coincidence, and it is not legal. She was already typing. I'm retaining a forensic video analyst today. I want the metadata, the edit points, the original file length, everything. The two city council members who had been most publicly vocal in their support of Ryan had gone quiet. No statements. No returned calls from the Times reporter. Just silence, which was its own kind of statement. The Times ran a follow-up story that evening, balanced, careful, and hedging in a way the original story had not been. "Questions remain" was in the headline. Ryan read those two words and felt something shift in his chest. Not despair, something colder than despair. The recognition of a machine operating exactly as designed. Then came the final blow. Karen's phone rang. She listened, said thank you in a voice that meant the opposite, and hung up. She looked at Ryan. "The disciplinary hearing has been expedited," she said. "Someone filed an internal order. It's been moved up before the public records lawsuit can produce the IA file." The room was quiet. Ryan looked at the conference table covered in preparation documents that had just become insufficient. He looked at Karen, who looked tired in a way he hadn't seen before. Not defeated, but carrying something heavy behind her eyes. "This is what they do when they're scared," she said. "They accelerate." Ryan was quiet for a moment. He thought about his father, about decades of fighting machines exactly like this one, about the fact that Robert Mitchell had never once let the machine set the pace. "Then we accelerate too," Ryan said. Karen looked at him, then she reached for her legal pad. "Start talking," she said. "We have the time we have." Karen's whiteboard had 4 columns. Ryan saw it the moment he walked in the next morning. She had been there since before dawn. The coffee pot was already half empty, and there were crumpled legal pad sheets in the trash that told him she'd started over before she got it right. The whiteboard stood against the wall beside her desk, uncapped markers lined up on the tray below it like soldiers. 4 columns, 4 moves, each one labeled, timed, and assigned. "Sit down," she said. "We have no room for anything that isn't essential." Ryan sat. She handed him coffee without being asked. Move 1 took focus and cost Derek Lawson something he hadn't expected to lose. Karen drafted a formal written demand requiring the disciplinary hearing to be recorded and open to the public under California government code. She cited the statute by number, by subsection, and by the case precedents that had upheld it in similar proceedings. She sent it to the hearing board's administrative coordinator with a read receipt request and a response deadline. The coordinator called back. The board was reviewing the request. Karen told her politely that there was nothing to review. The statute was not a suggestion, and that if the board intended to proceed with a closed session, she would file for an emergency injunction. The coordinator called back. The hearing would be open and recorded. Karen drew a check mark in the first column without looking away from her notepad. Move 2 arrived at the office in the form of Matt Carter, who appeared in the doorway in his civilian clothes holding a manila envelope and wearing the expression of a man who was working very hard not to look pleased with himself. He set the envelope on Karen's desk. Inside were 2 sworn affidavits, Tommy Rivera from Pasadena, Gary Thompson from Burbank, both notarized, both detailed, both describing in their own words and, from their own experience, Derek Lawson's pattern of territorial aggression at multi-agency emergency scenes. Scenes where his authority ended at the yellow tape and he crossed it anyway. Karen read both documents without speaking. When she finished the second one, she set it down and looked at Matt. "These are good," she said. "These are very good." Matt shrugged with the particular modesty of someone who knows exactly how good something is. "Ryan would have done it for me," he said. He left. Karen put the affidavits in the hearing folder and drew a check mark in the second column. Move 3 came from a courtroom across town and landed in Karen's email inbox. The Superior Court judge reviewing the public records lawsuit had issued an emergency order for partial immediate disclosure of the IA file. His written order noted the suspicious relationship between the public records request, the civil rights filing, and the sudden expediting of the disciplinary hearing. He used the phrase "appearance of bad faith" without quite saying it was bad faith, which was the judicial equivalent of saying it very loudly. The city's attorney had until the following morning to produce the partial disclosure. Karen read the order twice. Then she forwarded it to Paul Jenkins, the union attorney, with a single line of text. They blinked. Move 4 was completed at night in a small video production studio in Burbank, where a forensic media analyst named David Chen had spent hours working on the dashcam clip. Ryan and Karen sat across from him at a monitor while he walked them through his findings. The original recording was full length. The circulated clip was short. Chen identified discrete edit points, digital fingerprints left behind in the file's metadata, like footprints in wet concrete. He had recovered enough of the original file structure to establish that the removed footage showed Supervisor Thompson speaking first at length in a tone the analyst described clinically as elevated. The clip had not been discovered. It had been constructed. Chen produced a report with time-stamped frame analysis and signed it with his professional credentials. Karen added it to the hearing folder. She drew the 4th check mark. They drove back to her office in silence. She spread everything across the conference table. 4 moves, all complete, all documented, all ready. She stood at the edge of the table and looked at it for a long moment. "We're ready," she said quietly. Ryan looked at the folder with his name on the tab, at the evidence that had been built piece by piece from the rubble of what Lawson and his uncle had tried to make permanent. "Yes," he said, "we are." The hearing was scheduled. Ryan arrived at City Hall in his dress uniform, the one he wore to medal ceremonies and funerals, and the occasions that demanded a person show up as the fullest possible version of themselves. The brass buttons were polished, the creases were sharp. He had been up early and had made breakfast for his daughters and driven them to school himself the way he did when something important was about to happen, and he needed ordinary before it did. The hearing room was on the 3rd floor. He could hear it before he reached the door. Not noise, exactly. More like the low, compressed energy of a space that had more people in it than it was designed for. When he pushed the door open, he stopped for just a moment. The room held seats in the public gallery. Every one of them was filled. People stood along the back wall, shoulder to shoulder. The air was warm already and carried the particular charge of a crowd that had come with intention. In the front row sat Susan Miller. She had brought members of her church congregation exactly as she had promised. Every single one of them was wearing a yellow and black shirt, Station 7's colors, that they had purchased themselves from a sporting goods store when Susan had organized it via the church phone tree with the focused efficiency of a woman who had spent years coordinating field trips and Christmas pageants and was not remotely intimidated by logistics. Susan herself sat at the center of the row with her hands folded in her lap and her reading glasses on, looking like she was prepared to grade papers if the proceedings ran slow. Ryan caught her eye. She gave him a single firm nod. He nodded back. Brooke and Maddie were in the 3rd row, Brooke sitting straight with her hands clasped. Maddie scanning the room with wide, alert eyes. Matt was to their left in his dress uniform, back straight, jaw set, looking like he had been carved from something solid. Captain Rebecca Hayes sat in the row directly behind Ryan's table, close enough that he could feel her presence the way you feel a fire at your back. Steady heat, reliable warmth. Paul Jenkins, the union attorney, was already at the table. His briefcase open, papers sorted into neat stacks. He looked up when Ryan sat down and said simply, "Good morning. Let's finish this." Karen took the seat to Ryan's left and set her hearing folder on the table with a quiet final sound. The 3-member hearing board entered. They arranged themselves behind the elevated panel at the front of the room with the stiff, deliberate movements of people who had expected a very different kind of mourning. The chair, a senior city official named Richard Bennett, silver-haired, the kind of man whose entire professional life had been spent managing things quietly, surveyed the packed gallery with an expression that moved quickly through surprise and settled uneasily into something that was trying to look like composure. He had not anticipated Susan Miller's church group. He had not anticipated cameras. He had not anticipated any of this. Bennett called the hearing to order and laid out the procedural framework in the careful monotone of someone reading from a script. Ryan kept his eyes forward and his hands flat on the table. Then Karen stood up. She moved to the center of the room with the unhurried authority of a woman who had stood in harder rooms than this one and had always known exactly where the door was. She opened the hearing folder and began. First, she entered the partial IA file disclosure into the record. Every page of it, including the suppressed paramedic statement and the 2 prior complaint closures bearing the signature of a supervisor who reported to Robert Lawson. She read the relevant sections aloud, slowly, clearly, in the voice she used when she wanted every word to land individually. Board member Bennett shifted in his chair. The woman to his left wrote something on her notepad. The man to his right had stopped blinking. Then Karen entered the two sworn affidavits from Tommy Rivera and Gary Thompson. She summarized each one briefly. Enough for the record, enough for the room. Then she entered David Chen's forensic video analysis with his professional credentials and his findings demonstrating that the leaked dashcam clip had been deliberately and professionally edited. The room was very quiet. Karen closed the folder. She looked at the board. "The people in this room deserve the truth," she said, "and we've just handed it to you." She sat down. Ryan kept his eyes forward. Karen leaned slightly toward him and said, barely above a whisper, "Now, we call Susan." Susan Miller did not hurry. She stood up from the front row, smoothed the front of her yellow and black shirt with both hands, and walked to the witness table at a pace that suggested she had nowhere more important to be and nothing more pressing to do, and that this was simply the next thing that needed doing, and she intended to do it properly. She sat down. She adjusted her reading glasses. She folded her hands on the table in front of her. The room was so quiet that the air conditioning hummed audibly in the ceiling above them. Board chair Richard Bennett leaned toward his microphone. "Mrs. Miller, you've been called as a witness to describe what you observed at the scene of the incident on the freeway overpass on the date in question. Please, in your own words." Susan looked at him the way she used to look at students who stated the obvious. "That's why I'm here," she said pleasantly. She began. She described the crash the way a person describes something they have replayed so many times it has worn grooves into their memory. Not dramatically, but precisely. The impact, the roll, the moment the minivan came to rest on its side and the world outside the broken window became smoke and heat and the distant sound of other people's panic. She described her own condition. A gash on her forearm from the shattered window, cracked ribs from the seatbelt, her left hip jammed against the door panel in a way that made movement impossible. She described reaching her hands toward the window because she needed someone outside to see that she was alive. Then she described Matt. "The first firefighter, the one who came to me, he had his tool out before he reached the van. He was moving fast, but he wasn't frantic. That's the thing people don't understand about people who are good at their jobs." She paused. "They move fast and they stay calm at the same time. He told me his name. He told me what he was going to do before he did it. I've had doctors who didn't give me that courtesy." A small sound moved through the gallery. Not quite a laugh, something warmer. Then she described Ryan. "The other firefighter, Firefighter Mitchell, he went to the burning car, the one with the woman and the baby." Her voice didn't change pitch or speed. It stayed exactly level. "I watched him through the window while I was waiting. I saw him pull that door open. I saw him carry that woman away from a car that was on fire. I saw him go back in for that child." She stopped for one beat. He went back into a burning car for someone else's child. The room was completely still. And then Susan said, "When both of them were safe on the ground, the police officer put him in handcuffs." Bennett shifted forward. "Mrs. Miller, to be precise, did you observe the interaction between Firefighter Mitchell and Officer Lawson that preceded the—" "I observed the entire thing," Susan said without waiting for him to finish. "I had an unobstructed view through the passenger window of the minivan for the duration of the incident. I was stationary. I was conscious, and I was paying attention because there wasn't much else I could do." She looked at Bennett steadily. Firefighter Mitchell did not raise his voice. He did not make an aggressive movement. He stood in front of that car because standing in front of that car was his job. The officer walked toward the car. The firefighter stepped in his path and the officer put him in handcuffs. She let that sit for a moment. That is the complete sequence of events in order. Bennett leaned toward his microphone again. "And you are certain, given the stress of the situation, the smoke, the noise—" Susan looked at him over her reading glasses with an expression of such patient, absolute certainty that Richard Bennett actually stopped mid-sentence. "Young man," she said, "I was a schoolteacher for years. I have been certain about what I see for a very long time." The gallery exhaled into something that was half laugh and half applause before anyone thought to suppress it. Bennett raised his hand for order. It took a moment. Karen stood when the room settled. She addressed the board directly and without theater. She laid out the complete picture, the arrest, the IA obstruction, the retaliatory citation, the expedited hearing timeline, and named each piece for what it was. Then she placed her request formally on the record. The disciplinary citation against Ryan. David Mitchell to be dismissed with prejudice, and her intent to proceed with the full civil lawsuit unless the city took immediate and visible corrective action regarding both Officer Derek Lawson and Deputy Chief Robert Lawson. She sat down. Ryan stared straight ahead. He could feel Hayes behind him. He could feel his daughters in the third row. He could feel the weight of everything that had been built sitting in that folder on the table in front of him. Board Chair Bennett said, "We'll recess." The three board members stood and filed out through the side door. The room held its breath. Susan Miller folded her hands, settled back in her chair, and waited with the untroubled patience of a woman who already knew how this ended. The side door opened. The room, which had settled into a low murmur during the recess, went silent the moment the door moved. It happened in a wave. The back wall first, then the middle rows, then the front, until by the time Richard Bennett and the two board members had taken their seats behind the panel, the only sound in the room was the air conditioning and the distant muffled noise of the building existing outside these walls. Bennett arranged his papers. He cleared his throat. He began to read. In the matter of the disciplinary citation filed against firefighter Ryan David Mitchell, Station 7, Glendale Fire Department. Bennett paused for a fraction of a second, the way a person pauses when they are about to say something they know will change the temperature of a room. This board finds the citation to be unsupported by the factual record and inconsistent with established departmental protocol. The citation is dismissed in its entirety. The gallery detonated. It wasn't polite applause. It was the sound of people who had been holding something in and had just been told they could put it down. Susan's church group was on their feet. Someone in the back was cheering. Maddie grabbed Brooke's arm with both hands, and Brooke, composed, controlled Brooke, who had her father's discipline, pressed her hand over her mouth and closed her eyes. Matt sat perfectly still. Then he put his face in his hands. Ryan closed his eyes just for a moment, just a second of darkness, and the sound of the room around him. The cheering, the release, the particular noise of justice arriving after you had stopped being sure it would. Then he opened them. Bennett was still reading. He had to raise his voice slightly to be heard, and something about that, the board chair of a city disciplinary hearing having to speak over a crowd of people celebrating, felt exactly right. Furthermore, this board recommends the immediate initiation of an independent review of internal affairs oversight procedures within the West Bureau of the Los Angeles Police Department, with particular attention to case closure processes and supervisory chain of command conflicts and complaints involving active duty officers. He didn't say Robert Lawson's name. He didn't need to. Every person in the room who needed to understand understood. Karen set down her pen on the table with the quiet finality of a period at the end of a very long sentence. She looked at Ryan. He looked at her. No words passed between them. None were necessary. Paul Jenkins, to Ryan's right, closed his briefcase with a clean, decisive click. Outside the building, the consequences moved faster than anyone had predicted. The police commission had convened an emergency session. The commission, not the department, a distinction that carried its own unmistakable message about where the institutional trust had collapsed, issued a statement. Deputy Chief Robert Lawson was placed on immediate administrative leave pending the outcome of the independent review. His access credentials had already been suspended. His nephew found out through a phone call, not a courtesy visit. Derek Lawson received his formal notice of disciplinary proceedings. Real proceedings before a board that had no structural connection to his uncle, reviewing a complaint file that now included 2 reopened prior complaints, the suppressed paramedic statement, and the sworn affidavits from Tommy Rivera and Gary Thompson. The paramedic whose statement had been buried received a phone call from a new IA investigator that afternoon. She asked if she was still willing to give her account. She said she had been waiting for that call. Councilwoman Jennifer Lee held her press conference on the steps of City Hall. She announced the formation of the First Responder Coordination Task Force, a permanent body charged with establishing clear enforceable jurisdiction protocols at multi-agency emergency scenes across Los Angeles and Glendale. She said firefighter Ryan Mitchell would be invited to serve as a founding advisory member. She said his name clearly into the microphones in front of the cameras. Ryan watched it from Karen's office on her laptop. He watched Councilwoman Lee say his name, and he thought about Lisa Bennett and her daughter. He thought about Susan Miller pressing her hands against that broken window. He thought about his father's law degree on the wall at home and the quiet voice that said not quietly in his own head. The Los Angeles Times posted their story above the fold front page. A photograph of Ryan in his dress uniform shaking Councilwoman Lee's hand on the City Hall steps, taken by the same reporter who had covered the original story, who had followed this from the beginning and had never stopped following it. The headline read, "The Firefighter Who Wouldn't Go Quietly." Ryan read it once. Then he looked at Karen across the desk. "Thank you," he said. Karen looked at him over her reading glasses for a long moment. "Your father would have won this too," she said. "But he would have enjoyed watching you do it." Sometime later, Ryan drove to work the same way he always did. Same route, same left turn off Kenneth Road, same parking spot beside the bay door that everyone knew was his even though it wasn't assigned. He sat in the car for a moment after he turned off the engine, the way he sometimes did on ordinary mornings, when he wanted to hold the quiet for one more second before the day began. Then he heard it. Voices, more than there should have been at the start of a regular shift. He could hear Matt's laugh, specifically the full one, not the polite one, booming through the bay door from somewhere inside. Ryan got out of the car. They were all there. Not just the day shift, both shifts people who had no reason to be at the station except that they wanted to be. The common room had been pushed back to make space, and Matt had set up folding tables end to end and covered them with enough food to survive a natural disaster. There was a sheet cake in the center that read, "Station 7" in yellow frosting, with a small plastic firefighter helmet pressed into the top corner that had clearly come from a child's birthday party supply pack and was deployed here without any apparent irony. Ryan stood in the doorway and looked at all of them. Ramirez, the young guy, started clapping first. Then everyone joined, and for a moment the bay filled with the kind of noise that had nothing to do with alarms or emergencies. Just people glad together, making the specific sound of relief that has been held in too long. Ryan raised one hand. He tried to say something and found briefly that he couldn't. Matt filled the gap immediately, because Matt always did. "He's speechless," he announced to the room. "Write it down. This is historic." That broke it. Ryan laughed and the room laughed with him, and the morning began. Captain Rebecca Hayes appeared at his elbow and tilted her head toward the hallway. He followed her to her office. She closed the door behind them, which was unusual. She turned and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Something quieter than her usual directness, something that had been carefully carried for a while. She reached into her desk drawer and produced a white envelope. "This came through official channels," she said. "Chief Grant signed off personally." She held it out. "I wanted to give it to you here today." Ryan took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a formal departmental citation, clean letterhead, precise language, the fire chief's signature at the bottom in blue ink. He read the first paragraph and stopped. The department's Medal of Valor awarded to firefighter Ryan David Mitchell, Station 7, for the rescue of Lisa Bennett and her daughter at the freeway overpass. The medal ceremony was scheduled. The citation had been in process since the day of the crash, moving quietly through the proper channels the entire time, undisturbed, while everything else had exploded around it. As if the department had known all along what that afternoon on the overpass actually was, regardless of what anyone tried to make it look like. Ryan stood in Hayes' office and read it twice. "The little girl," he said. "She's okay?" "Healthy as a horse," Hayes said. "Her mother called the department last week." She reached back into the desk drawer and produced a second envelope, smaller, a personal card, not official correspondence. She handed it over without a word. Ryan opened it. The handwriting inside was careful and deliberate, each letter formed with the particular attention of someone for whom this communication mattered too much to be hurried. The card was from Lisa Bennett. "You gave my daughter her whole life. There is nothing I can give you that is equal to that, but I wanted you to know we say your name in this house every day." Ryan read it once. He folded it carefully along its original crease. He put it in the left breast pocket of his uniform shirt over his heart and pressed his hand flat against it for just a moment. Then he walked back to the common room. He didn't see Susan Miller until he nearly walked into her. She was standing just inside the bay door, holding a bundt cake with both hands, looking around the room with the expression of a woman who had decided she was invited and was now simply locating the best place to set down her contribution. "You're not on the list," Ryan said. "I don't use lists," Susan said. She looked around until she found the table and walked toward it with complete authority. Ryan followed her. She found a spot for the cake, straightened up and turned to face him. She took both his hands in hers, not gently but firmly, the grip of a woman who meant what she said with her whole body. "Your father would be proud," she said. Ryan looked at her. "How did you know about my father?" "I looked you up," she said it simply. "I look everything up. I was a school teacher." Ryan laughed. It came from somewhere deep and unguarded, the full released laugh of a man who had carried something crushing and had finally completely set it down. It filled the room. Matt heard it from across the common room and grinned without knowing why, the way people grin when they hear a sound that tells them everything is genuinely, truly fine. Ryan stood in his firehouse with the medal citation in his right pocket and Lisa Bennett's letter pressed against his heart, surrounded by his crew. His captain, his daughters who had just arrived through the side door with a second cake because they had not coordinated with Matt, and one completely uninvited woman who had brought her own bundt cake and taken over the dessert table. Somewhere across town, Derek Lawson sat in a human resources office under fluorescent lights, waiting to be called into a room he could not leave the same way he entered it. And in a downtown office building, a man named Robert Lawson was cleaning out his desk. Justice didn't always arrive loudly, but when it arrived completely, when it filled every corner of the room and left nothing dark untouched, it felt exactly like this. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support the channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day. I'm watching this from Hong Kong, and if you're reading this, hit that subscribe button right now. Tomorrow's story is going to hit even harder. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do isn't running into the fire, it's standing still in it. Ryan Mitchell didn't just save a mother and her child that day. He stood his ground when every instinct screamed to back down, when power tried to rewrite the truth right in front of rolling cameras, when the system itself turned against the man who had risked everything to do what was right. He showed us that real courage often looks quiet, shoulders back, voice steady, heart pounding, but refusing to step aside from what you know is correct. It's protecting the vulnerable even when it costs you. It's trusting that doing the right thing, even when it feels like the whole world is watching you lose, is never actually losing. This story reminds us that integrity isn't loud or flashy. It's the firefighter who goes back into the flames for someone else's baby, then stands between danger and the people who should be helping him. It's the quiet strength of a father shielding his daughters from the storm while he fights an invisible machine. It's the stubborn belief that truth and decency still matter, even when powerful people try to bury them. Life will test you. Someone will try to handcuff your character when you're simply doing your job. The crowd may go silent, the system may turn slow and cold, but if you keep your shoulders square, your voice calm, and your hands ready to serve others instead of saving yourself, the truth has a way of breaking through. Good people still show up. Justice, when it finally arrives, feels like coming home. What about you? Have you ever had to stand your ground when it cost you something real? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you even half as much as it moved me, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The next one is already in the works, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. See you in the comments, friends. Stay strong out there.